Nevada's cultural heritage is known worldwide, and it's as varied as our bright neon cities and rugged wilderness landscapes. Every week, the Nevada Department of Cultural Affairs brings a piece of that heritage to your living rooms through our documentary series, Exploring Nevada. I'm producer and host Gwen Clancy. Welcome to the colorful world of cultural affairs. Much of what makes a place intriguing is its built environment. During the early 20th century, a nationally acclaimed architect spent some time in Nevada. Today, we'll take a look at the legacy he left here, through the eyes of architectural historian Mela Harmon and journalist Geralda Miller, who is studying African American history in northern Nevada. Our story begins on an early June morning on the banks of the Truckee River, at the handsome structure known currently as the Lear Theater, but historically as the First Church of Christ Scientist. In 1999, it was added to the National Register of Historic Places.
Would you define this as?
Well, it could actually fall under several categories and be correct. Colonial revival, Greek revival, classical revival. I would call it neoclassical revival because it has that two-story portico and those wonderful columns that are just so exquisite with the acanthus leaves at the top. Corinthian
Is this Corinthian column? Yes, Corinthian.
Because the Corinthian column has the floral stuff at the top, and it can be other plants. This is the traditional one. The Ionic column is the one with the volutes, and those are the curlicues, and I love that word, volute. And then the Doric is the one that's just plain.
Plain, okay.
Paul Williams really enjoyed doing is using these sorts of kind of lacy, almost delicate features on his building.
Oh, and look over there, a mailbox.
The mailbox. How great. I guess the church would be getting mail too.
Looking across over at the Truckee and at the beautiful homes across from the Truckee River here, this beautiful, calm environment, you can imagine that even back in the 30s, that this was a welcoming church for its community.
In the 1930s, there was a remarkable architect practicing his trade in Nevada. He had a penchant for ironwork and for Regency design and patios and romantic design. He was a black man in a town, Reno, Nevada, that was not welcoming to racial minorities. In this program, we're going to take a look at some of Paul Revere Williams' better-known works. But we're also going to have the rare opportunity to take a look at some of the lesser-known ones that are privately owned. Paul Williams died in 1980. Up to that point, little was known of his work. In 1993, his granddaughter, Karen Hudson, wrote a beautiful book focusing on all of his commissions that she knew of. She lists his commissions by decade, including some wonderful photographs of his commissions. I particularly like this page of Paul Williams and his family in the 1930s, because most of the work he did in Nevada occurred in the 1930s. Paul Revere Williams was born in 1894 in Los Angeles, California, and was orphaned by age 4. While going through school, he excelled in art and design. In order to present his ideas to his clients, he had to learn to draw upside down because it was untoward for a black man to stand next to a white client. But his designs were so endearing and so engaging to his clients that he quickly became known as the architect to the stars because Hollywood people wanted his designs. In 1931, one of the big breaks for Paul Williams was the design of a home for E.L. Cord in Beverly Hills. In 1933, remarkably, he shows up in Reno, Nevada, designing a home for a woman named Luella Garvey. Luella Garvey had come to Nevada in 1929 from Pasadena, California. It's unknown how she might have known Paul Williams, but it seems clear that she was the first to bring him here, although hard and fast evidence of that has not really been found.
The old ranch house at Rancho San Rafael Park was also designed by Williams and may offer clues as to how this Southern California architect found his way to northern Nevada.
This house was built for a Los Angeles dentist named Raphael Herman and his brother Norman Herman. They actually ran a cattle ranch up here that had originally been owned by the Pincolini brothers. Paul Williams designed this beautiful house for them, and we suspect, since Dr. Herman was from Los Angeles, that he knew of Paul Williams from that connection. The building has been modified over time, so it's a little difficult at the present to discern what it looked like originally, because no original photographs have been found. Paul Williams' earliest designs were Spanish colonial, and he developed a penchant for patios and for including landscaping in his architectural designs. Another distinctive feature of Paul Williams' work is metal work. He loved to use decorative metal work. And here at Rancho San Rafael Park, I want to point out this gorgeous barbecue hood that would have been original to Paul Williams' design. This has this kind of French Regency flair to it that he really favored. And this is just a marvelous example of his romantic design work. And from this side, you can see the upstairs porch. We can imagine the Hermans and their guests sitting on this patio on a summer's morning, sipping coffee, looking out over this wonderful ranch land. And we're going to go right in here on the front porch into the front entrance of the house. Paul Williams also worked with classical architectural details, as we see here at the door surround on the entrance to the Rancho San Rafael Ranch House. So let's knock on the door and go inside. For a while, we weren't really sure when this home was built. It was sort of an enigma. We knew Paul Williams designed it, and we knew approximately when the Herman brothers owned it, but the precise date of the construction of the building was not known to us. The park staff very generously presented for us to look at this sign-in book, this guest book that was owned by the Hermans. And as you can see from the title of the cover, they called this property Rancho San Rafael. Inside this guest book are some wonderful notes from people who visited the Hermans at the very beginning of the ranch. And you'll notice the date is 1936. And this is the earliest dates shown in this book. So we suspect, and based on this, that the buildings were built here in around 1936. Although this was a working ranch, the ranch house was actually quite formal in its design. Notice here the beautiful formal fireplace with the surround here that actually copies those around the front door. And as you look through the room, there are other details such as the wainscoting and the pediment over the door, which demonstrates Paul Revere Williams' facility with that style. This is the way you get to the upstairs part of the house. But please note on the way the beautiful metal hand railing, which exhibits Paul Williams' interest in decorative ironwork. Particularly note the beautiful little leaf end here at the bottom. We believe that right over here was the master bedroom because it's at the front of the house. But you're going to see as we walk through the upstairs that there's an interesting way that these rooms interconnect. And we can see that all of the bedrooms are very interestingly interconnected. We know the Hermans came to Nevada in response to some advantageous tax benefits in Nevada. They were wealthy people from Southern California. Now we're going to go look at a little property that housed the average person. In the heart of Reno's Old Southwest, we're standing in front of another one of Paul Revere Williams' works. This particular building behind me is one of 15 units of the former El Reno apartment complex that was originally located between Arroyo and Pueblo Streets off of South Virginia Street. They were moved in 1961. There are two here, and right around the corner on Mount Rose is another one. And this is the largest concentration of El Reno apartments in town, although we know of a total of 13 of the original 15 that still exist throughout town. The two El Reno apartments behind me are currently for sale. The El Reno apartments were built for Roland Giroux in 1938. They were little individual units of several bedrooms, 2 or 3 bedrooms, and a kitchen and a bathroom. Very comfortable little properties. They housed a variety of people in Reno, from casino workers to divorce seekers. And if you look up on the roof, Paul Williams had this wonderful air circulation method to keep the rooms cool, and that is the rooftop turbine. When the wind blows, the turbine spins, drawing hot air from the inside of the building. In a way, you could say Paul Williams was green before his time. The characteristic features of the El Reno apartments are these lovely bay windows in the front with the casement windows, and also the ironwork over the porch. Each one of the El Renos had that, and many of the ones still existing continue to have those elements. Paul Williams' design for the El Reno apartments was basically all modular. The exterior consisted of metal panels that he intended to look like wood, and he was very successful because really the only way you would know is if you were lucky enough to get that metal sound by tapping on it, and by feeling under here you can tell that it's a very relatively thin piece of metal, but it's distinctively metal. The idea to make it look like wood was that he wanted it to look like a real house, but in fact all parts of it were modular. The inside was also of modular materials, all man-made materials. These wall panels are made out of what was essentially an early fiberboard, intended to give insulation, but to be inexpensive and easy to take care of because he knew these were going to be rentals, I suspect, and the sense of these homes was to be easy care, inexpensive living. The floor plan of these little units was very compact, consisting of a couple of bedrooms, a bath, and a kitchen, and it was intended for an average worker. I want to point out the incredible quality of light that comes through these metal casement windows that were very common in that period. And off the kitchen and connecting to the bedroom is the little bathroom. In this case, in this unit, it is fairly well intact with the original sink and the original bathtub. And the reason we know this is the original sink is because of the shape and the use of the legs, which was very common at that period. Remarkably, this kitchen contains many of its original features. The sink and the metal cabinets would have been original, the countertops. And this stove appears to be something that would have been original or at least appropriate to that period. So the kitchen really gives us a feel of what it would have been like to live in an El Reno in 1939 when they were first built. And look over here, it still has its label that says Modern Steel Cabinets by the Modern Equipment Company, Geneva, Illinois. This was early kitchen cabinetry. Originally, the early kitchens didn't have cabinets. You had something like a Hoosier cabinet and a big table in your kitchen, and that was your workspace. But now with these modular units, women had all of the conveniences of having storage in their kitchen and these wonderful metal cabinets. Paul Williams came out of a movement of the early 20th century where architects were interested in providing good architecture for the common man. The feeling was that architecture as an art form should be able to enhance the lives of average Americans. I'm sitting in front of Reno's beautiful Truckee River. We're actually just a little bit upriver from the first Church of Christ Scientist that Paul Revere Williams designed in 1938. While working on that commission, he met Anna Loomis, who was a member of the church. And for her, he commissioned the Loomis Manor Apartments. These apartments are in a completely different style than we've seen today. They're Art Deco and Art Moderne, done in late 1939. They're in a U-shape around a central patio, which he loved so much. He loved incorporating landscape features with his architecture. And right here through this decorative ironwork, you can see one of the original signs on this patio wall. It says Loomis Manor, 1045 Riverside Drive. The architectural features evident here in the patio are these wonderful Art Deco door canopies and the glass block windows. in addition to the horizontal nature of the design. These glass block windows are over the stairwells, and you're going to see from the inside what remarkable light it provides. If you'd lived in the Loomis Manor apartments in the 1930s, where do you think the milkman would have left your milk? Paul Williams took care of that by these clever little doors right here. Right in here in a lead-lined door, your milk bottles would have stood. From this angle, you can see that marvelous quality of light coming through the glass block windows onto the stairwell. Currently, there are 18 units in the Loomis Manor apartments, a combination of one-bedroom and studio apartments. The person that occupies this apartment has a fantastic view of the patio through these remarkable metal casement windows that actually function like double-hung windows. This is the compact kitchen in this unit, and it has some original features, these marvelous cabinets with the wonderful Art Deco handles on it, and this incredible light fixture that would be original, or certainly original design. And this kitchen also has the original tile and faucet fixture. I am particularly fond of bathroom fixtures, and I want to point out this exquisite sink. Look at the sculptural aspect of this wonderful sink. Another advantage of living at the Loomis Manor apartments was that some of the units came with garages. There are many mysteries surrounding Paul Revere Williams' time in Nevada. This was not a particularly welcoming place for African Americans, and it would have been difficult for him to conduct business here. But we are awfully fortunate that he persisted and created these wonderful architectural pieces in our town and in our state, some for the common man and some for the wealthy.
To better understand what Nevada was like when Paul Revere Williams was working here, we turn to Geralda Miller, who has undertaken an in-depth study into African American history in northern Nevada.
Geralda, I know you're studying black activism in Reno. Give me an idea of what you think life would have been like for Paul Williams here.
Well, Jim Crow was alive and well in Reno at that time period. From the interviews that I have conducted with many that were living here, and many were young at that time that I've interviewed, they tell me of a time that they call the Mississippi of the West.
I've heard that.
Yes, quite a few. I've heard it from everyone that I've interviewed. And that means to me that although the population was very small here, there were very few places that they were allowed into. They weren't allowed to go into the restaurants. They weren't allowed to go into any of the social establishments here because of the color of their skin. Less than 1% of the population was African American in the entire state. So the fact that he came here during that time is it's amazing.
Well, I had done an oral history with the daughter of Andrew Ginocchio, who ran Reno Ironworks. And of course, Paul Williams' architecture features so much ironwork, this beautiful ironwork. And so he worked with Andrew Ginocchio in that firm. And Andrew Ginocchio said through his daughter that Paul Williams had a very difficult time working here, that he had trouble getting subcontractors, he had trouble getting paid, he had trouble dealing with other firms that produced materials for him, but that Andrew Ginocchio had developed a respect for him and recognized in him this remarkable artistry and sort of felt a sympathy for what he was facing here. Now, Andrea Pelter said that she believed that Paul Williams had an office in a house right behind the church here in the home of Ethel Zimmer, who was a piano teacher in town. And that's where his office was for this project. And he was also, I know from some other research I did, was a member of the AME Church in Los Angeles. So I'm guessing that he may have had a relationship with Bethel AME Church here, which of course is only a few blocks up.
Right. It's very close to here.
So
Bethel AME was probably one of the main places that they congregated and they socialized there, which is just a few blocks from here.
Right.
So, and we also know now that Bethel AME Church had the boarding house adjacent to it.
Oh, yes.
And so that boarding house probably was, the place where many were welcome. here. We know also that there were families that invited visitors, people that were coming into town who didn't know what Reno was like. Many of the African Americans who might have been traveling through and needed a place to stay.
Right. Geralda, looking at Karen Hudson, Paul Williams' granddaughter's wonderful book called A Legacy of Style, which features so many of the remarkable works that he did in Los Angeles County, Beverly Hills, Holmby Hills, where he was considered the architect to the stars, even during the time that he was in Reno. How do you think his designs in Reno stack up and compare to the work he did in Los Angeles?
I think that they're just as magnificent. Here, I have been in the Garvey house, and I remember walking through that house and saying, oh my gosh,
yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It is, the detailing that was done.
A very well-known architectural historian stated about Paul Williams' works is that it was romantic. That there was a little romanticism embedded in every design, from Art Deco. He did Spanish Revival in his early days as an architect, but all of them had this little romantic air about it. He was really fond of interior courtyards, you know, and that's kind of a romantic element, I think. He loved banisters.
Right, always.
Apparently, because every interior I've seen has had this very dramatic.
Right, the dramatic entry.
Yes, and the Garvey house has something similar.
Right.
Even the ranch house at Rancho San Rafael Park, which isn't a particularly ornate building, but it has all of those details. It has the banister, and it has pediments over the doors, and a very classical fireplace. But then he's very modern. I mean, when you look at some of these interiors that he's done, particularly the store ones that I found really interesting.
And the commercial buildings as well.
Yeah, I mean, look at that.
Buildings. Right, and when you think about
that
LA, Los Angeles Airport.
Yes. That's
that
right.
Structure. Look at that. Isn't that just so, talk about modernity.
Yes, it's very much like a spaceship, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So ahead of his time.
He was.
Yeah.
So Geralda, what can it mean to present-day Reno, both African Americans and everybody else, that we had people of the stature of Paul Revere Williams in our community during the 30s?
You know, that's such a good question. And right now, I think that there's very little African American history that's been documented here about Reno and Nevada, which is that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I don't know whether that many people that even who live here are aware of the African American history. How many really know about Paul R. Williams and his contribution to Reno? I don't really think that it's as known as it should be. So we have an opportunity here.
Yes, we do.
To educate and inform Reno, Nevada, and the rest of the country about what was going on right here, you know, in the 1930s here in Reno, Nevada.
Paul Williams also designed some buildings in Las Vegas. He designed a ranch house for E.L. Cord outside of Silver Peak. He also designed a couple of residences, a church, and a shopping center. But his signature piece in Las Vegas was La Concha Motel. The La Concha is designed like a large clamshell. It's quite a remarkable structure. And it recently closed and was facing demolition. But local preservation groups managed to get it moved to the Neon Boneyard, and it is going to be preserved.
I've put it as one of our priorities in order to preserve our history here. As you know, the city of Las Vegas is really very interested in making sure that we do not implode those things that really make us special and different. We have the post office building that we're renovating into the Mob Museum. We've got the Fifth Street Elementary School that we're making into an intellectual marketplace, the high school. I mean, these are jewels, and this particular edifice here is very, very special. It was designed by an African-American architect. Very few people know that, and it's a beautiful structure which is far ahead of its time. And to have allowed this to just go the way of all structures, as is usually the case here, would have been a shame and a crime. So we made arrangements to have it down here. This will be the entryway to our Neon Museum. It's very special. And we've got the Neon Boneyard in the back here, and those are things that differentiate us and make us distinctive from any other city. Nobody else has neon as our native art form, and this will preserve it and be available to the entire world. This will be a spot, you'll see this in every movie that they make about Las Vegas.
Please join us in preserving and celebrating our state's colorful heritage. Call 775-684-3448 or visit us at nevadaculture.org. Besides administering grants, the Preservation Office maintains state and national registers of historic places and runs the State Historic Marker Program. The Preservation Office is part of the Nevada Department of Cultural Affairs, along with the State Library and Archives, Nevada Arts Council, and Division of Museums and History. Through these agencies, the state of Nevada offers a wealth of cultural programs for residents and visitors alike. We invite you to check out our website or call 775-687-8323 in Carson City. And see you next time on Exploring Nevada. Restoring the Truckee River? Many said it couldn't be done, but the Nature Conservancy took on the challenge.
This was the biggest thing we've ever done.
A year later, things look different.
We're out here to see what we can find. You can see these small little trees that are growing. These are all cottonwood seedlings. This is what we call wiregrass.
We have wetlands. That means we have frogs. We have wetlands and insects. That means we have birds. And we have the diversity of all kinds of species at all kinds of ages.
The fish habitat, since they've changed the river, created the meander here, has just improved dramatically.
We're seeing actually already a huge improvement in the number of species and the number of birds that we can find out here as bird watchers or as ornithologists.
We're glad that they're working with the tribes and restoring the river to its natural ways here.
Standing here now on a early summer evening and hearing the shorebirds and the water moving through the river, it was so different here not so long ago.
The Nature Conservancy, protecting nature, preserving life.